So Gwen, you're working with carborundum since 1985. Can you tell us how you first encountered the medium of printmaking and why carborundum? It seems to make a major part of your practice. So what is the relationship between the two mediums you work in, painting and printmaking, and what is the nature of the transition between the two of them?
Yeah. 1985, I had a show on the project, a painting show, in 1984, and James McCreary and Alfonso Monreal Poncho, we call him, was a master printer from Mexico, but he was, I think he was artist in residence here in the Graphic Studio, but he was based in Belfast, however. So they invited me down to the studio as part of the Visiting Artist programme, having seen that show, and they thought that that would work in a workshop that Poncho was giving on holograph and carborundum. And so that's, I was delighted to go down and just try it out, and that was probably the first carborundum. And we went through an awful kind of, beginning with the colographs, especially with glue sticking to the plates and the press. But it was a very interesting process, and it did link, the type of work that I was doing at the time was quite textured, and colographs are textured. Carborundum is, as you know, it's very textured, and it is kind of, a different way of expressing my work, I suppose. It is very painterly, I have tried a few etchings, afterwards, but I actually, very fond of carborundum. I understand it, so.
Okay, and you had a solo exhibition here at Graphic Studio Gallery in 2017, where you have shown your printed works from last 30 years, including the new large-scale carborundum prints. Can you tell us about the experience of your collaboration with Graphic Studio Dublin through the visiting artist scheme, as you mentioned, and your time spent there, and results of your collaboration?
Oh, well, I mean, it's always great to go into the graphic studio. Every year or two I get this phone call saying, would you like to come in and make some prints, which is terrific, really, because you get out of your own studio. But also, whatever I'm working on at the particular time, I can, interpret them perhaps into prints. Or when I'm making paintings now, I think, I'm thinking maybe, that would work in carborundum. Not to mimic the painting, but just, the actual image would work well graphically, So I'm delighted to be part of the artist programme, because, it's a new exploration in my own work, and the larger we go, the better for me too, because, the little prints are like little studies or whatever, but, these ones, are probably nearer to my studio work. However, the studio work, the paintings, they are going bigger again, so it's a lot to do with scale for me,
When you mention painting and printmaking again, and the technicality of printmaking, it's much more restricted in some ways.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, the size, but also the discipline of the process.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that in relation to painting? Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's a different mindset, totally different mindset, and you have to really prepare yourself before I go into the studio to think about that mindset of how colours are going to land on top of one another. You don't think about that in the painting studio. You just do it. It's much more spontaneous. And over the years, you know what's going to happen, I suppose, from experience. I would perhaps steer myself up every time I do go into the graphic, because into that frame of mind of, right, what is going down there first, which plate, what colour is going down there, and then how many plates. And for the larger ones, you are very conscious of the people who are actually going to be inking these up and how long that takes, So over the years, I've tried to kind of get it right in my own studio before I bring the plates in to the graphic, because it can be nerve-wracking, you know. You're there, you know, after 2 hours inking up and it's not right. You have to say to them, look, we have to do it again or whatever, you know. So, and so that's all part of the process. I'm not trying to get it right, you know, because this print that for the newest print only took 2 proofs, which was terrific, you know. We just said, right, that's fine, second proof is it, you know. And that's the way, you know. I mean, you're on a momentum then, you want to kind of do another one, because they are so immediate that way, you know. And that's what I like, this spontaneity, perhaps, of a print, you know. It can be, you know.
So can you talk us through the process of making of these particular prints, let's say? Do you make sketches or studies in drawing or painting before you do a print, or how do you conceive it?
Yeah.
And what is the process like?
I do. I mean, I think that's the mindset I'm talking to you about, because, okay, if I choose an image that I want, that I think will work on a large scale, on a print, a carborundum, I then work that out layer by layer, you know, in small sketchbooks of what goes on the first plate, how many colours go on the first plate, and also, you know, with printmaking you can't really put 2 colours too close together on the one plate. So it's all worked out quite logically, you know, and because I'm working on the large perspex sheets, you are able to put on the carborundum on your 3 or 4 large plates, turn them around and have some idea of that image. Carborundum is only grey, horrible stuff, but you just have to imagine, you know, and then, you know, one colour, you know, on top of the other and whatever. And so it takes a bit of thinking about, you know, yeah.
And earlier on you mentioned the darkness, how important it is in your work.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
I think, you know, it probably has evolved over, you know, the number of years I've been working of, you know, that it's a sense of space. It's perhaps just a feeling of, you know, of calmness or of depth or of, you know, many things really. So it's really to balance that darkness with the other elements, which is usually the light. So you're creating a sense of space, you know, and bringing people into that space, perhaps.
Yes, and your sole exhibition here was called Immerse, kind of suggesting the effect your work has on viewers.
Yes.
It's very immersive.
Yes.
And the references that are mentioned in relation to your work are also Rothko, George O'Keeffe, and Romantic Sublime, which kind of goes in line with that.
Yes.
So it seems that this is something you are constantly trying to evoke in your work.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. And that is where scale comes in as well, because you're standing in front of this. Often, some images may not go big, you know, and they won't work that big. But yes, they will build up from the very small ones up gradually. And you know, the painting at the moment is going very big, you know. So it is all about, you know, getting some feeling there about when you are standing in front of these particular images, you know.
And apart from those mentioned, what would you say about the inspiration for your work and main influences?
I think nature for both. And also, I mean, I use, you know, water since, you know, a long, long time ago, and it's really a tool to operate with, you know, and it gives the workability in the studio, if you like, you know, the images are coming from nature, mostly the sea, and I find that sufficient enough to bring that into the studio, you know. It's very hard to bring, you know, nature into the studio, and I don't replicate nature, but it is something that I work from, you know. and that seems to be ongoing. It just evolves, you know, from a long time ago, many years ago.
Okay. Would you like to talk more about your large carborundums, or is there anything else you'd like to expand on?
No, but we have a couple of paintings here hanging alongside some of the prints, and you can see kind of the link, you know. So it's interesting just to have a different angle on my subject, and for me, you know, we have just done this one, and there's another one on the way before all this lockdown happened, you know. So I'm kind of excited about doing that and seeing, you know, how different this is even to the last series. So, you know, they're in development, you know, and that's kind of exciting too.
Maybe you could tell us, what do you see coming up next? Where do you think your work will go after
I don't know.
this?
That's interesting, but I don't know. You know, because, you know, a lot of the painting work has become, I suppose, less textured, and I'm letting the paint create that texture. Whereas, like in the prints, okay, you can just restrict the amount of texture necessary, and to deal with that space as well, you know, so that it's trying to get that balance, really, you know.